Welcome to Claims Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Gross. This is our first episode, so this is really exciting. And just for a quick background on why I started this podcast, it's because revenue cycle management is at a turning point. Innovation and technology are transforming the way we think about financial and operational efficiency. And I want to have real conversations about what's working, what's changing, and how new strategies are shaping the future. So, our first episode is to discuss how AI is transforming workflows. And I could think of no one better to discuss this hot topic but Ian Barkin. So, welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah,
Pleasure
I
to be
think.
here.
Thank you. We go way back. I think we met over a decade ago. Is that about right?
Yep.
Yeah.
When
And
we were both children. And,
right.
yes.
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 Yes. We've learned so much since then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, Ian, you're an entrepreneur, an investor, an author, most recently the co-founder of 2B Ventures. And you have deep expertise in automation, the future of work. And so just a perfect person to have while we talk about how AI is transforming workflows in RCM. So, Ian, I would love for you to introduce yourself because you'll do a much better job than I could ever do.
No, my pleasure, and thank you for having me. There's no place I'd rather be than here helping kick this podcast off. It's going to be huge. I have no doubt. You are amazing in your field. You know so much, and that you're bringing this knowledge to folks is going to be just stellar.
Thank you.
Okay, so who am I? So as you said, throughout my career, I kind of, I'd love to take credit for some sort of logic behind it, but I was working in outsourcing, helping enterprises really optimize operations by tapping into global talent. And then about 15 years ago, a component of that was how do you start to use technology, specifically automation software, to really augment and supercharge the people that were helping you to optimize your operation. And that set off the last sort of 15 years of my career and my journey, which has been using, understanding, applying, and helping enterprises to really discern which types of automation technology are right for their business, to really hopefully be a champion of what is actually useful, and not just sort of carry the torch of hype, because I don't know that helps anyone. And as you said, it's been an absolute dream to help enterprises understand and apply technology. And I've done some educating and writing and talking along the way, mostly hopefully being useful, but sharing what I've learned along the journey in ways that I hope benefit people.
Yeah, and I think it really has. And speaking of education, I think maybe just to level set before we get into AI and RCM, in your definition, what is AI? Starting with the most basic definition, and maybe talk about the different kinds, but just
certainly. Yeah, AI is tough because it's been with us for 70 years. It's a naming convention that doesn't seem to go away. We don't seem to tire of it, but it's always been unclear. And so for my own simple mind, I like to think about it as it's a collection of technologies that we use to really emulate and, again, and to assist humans doing the work the way that we do them, or do it. So ultimately, that's everything from transactional executional tasks. We do a lot of rule following and clicking and dragging and dropping and pasting, to some more of the, as the technology spectrum has advanced and the basket of tools that you have to choose from has expanded, thanks to the last decade of evolution. How do we then see, like we do with our eyes, documents and interpret the information on them? How do we hear and engage with whomever the customer of a process is? That can be through chat mediums or over voice. how do we use our brains to then look at and interpret and to make decisions based on the information and the process and the outcomes we hope to achieve. And that's a lot more of the sort of machine learning and especially nowadays more of the sort of large language model kind of capabilities. So effectively AI takes on new shapes, new definitions every era of tech evolution, but really it's just us as humans trying to emulate the way we do things and assist ourselves in ways that are valuable to the business.
That's a really it's a simplified explanation to which is a perfect foundation to kind of start talking about AI in healthcare and how AI can assist the people that might not have had an opportunity to explore all that it is and all the ways that it can help with the truly complex environment that we're all living in. So on that note, AI is being implemented across industries and in healthcare and RCM specifically, we see it implemented in several areas, denials tracking and management, automated payment solutions, claims handling, automated coding solutions, authorization, eligibility, you name it. We see it in all of these different areas. I guess my question is, given just how complex healthcare and RCM is in general, does that make it a prime candidate for automation, or is it not so much the level of complexity, but whether or not a task or process can be automated or repeated over and over again?
Right. No, it's great, and the context you set is important, as anyone in healthcare knows. And throughout my career, it was banking and healthcare had various different constraints and regulatory environments they had to survive in. Like any solution had to survive in. Obviously, the data that you're working with is very sensitive. There are quite a bit of sort of guardrails and rules that you have to comply with, which is ultimately why some of the most exciting tech that we see in the headlines these days just may not be right yet for the environment, because you really do have to rely on accuracy. You have to be able to audit. I'll probably come back to this one many times in our discussion. You have to know why something did what it did and why the outcome, if it's correct, that's great, but why it was correct. So you can go back and assure that it's correct every single time. But you're right. I mean, every one of the elements that you mentioned, from processing a claim to denial reduction to improving coding accuracy, optimizing just the patient billing process, all of them, if you atomize them down into the basic steps that make up those activities, there are places in those processes that require the intake, the evaluation, and the understanding of data, the application of that to knowing, okay, this is a rule set I have to now follow. Right? If it's this sort of claim, I need to follow certain rules because it's a certain provider, a certain state, or a certain type of procedure, et cetera.
Right.
But I have to assign that to those rules, and then I've got to execute against those rules faithfully. And then the nice thing about technology is if you teach it right, if you configure it correctly, then it gives you speed and accuracy in ways that create value for an enterprise.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. The speed and accuracy, if you train it correctly, if you have all of the right processes mapped out, documented, and you stay on top of that, to really be able to see what it can do for you and transform your workforce. And I'll just pick on denials management for a minute. Healthcare organizations are managing, unfortunately, more denials than they usually have staff to handle.
Absolutely.
And then it becomes, well, how do you prioritize if you only have so many resources to call on claims? How do you prioritize what becomes important, what becomes less important? And to properly manage that and give these healthcare organizations a shot at overturning these denials, even if healthcare organizations are doing everything right, they're still going to have denials. So what are your thoughts on applying AI in a place like high volume areas like denials.
Right. So this is the business case approach that you take in all of this is so much fun, and it's really interesting because, as you say, there are two different, well, there are multiple, but there are two key considerations that you need to make. When one of them is volume. So if you do something a lot, and ultimately again back to, and you can define what it is that good is and what you want as an outcome, then you can apply it there. And then the other is value. And so maybe there is lower volume to some things, but there's just a huge claim where it's worth spending the time to configure and train algorithms to help you really address those huge claims. And then everything in between. And to the point you made, ultimately, frankly, in every enterprise, regardless of the industry that they're in, there is more work than there are people to do it. And so they're always making that calculated decision around prioritizing what makes sense to throw their people at. And those people are domain experts, right? If they've been with you for a while, those folks are absolute experts in their craft. And so how do you use them optimally? How do you tap into that domain
Exactly.
expertise? And we spent a lot of time talking about sort of freeing your best people up to do their best work.
Exactly.
Because ultimately, if you've got this, I mean, you've got a long list and sort of a long sort of curve of more and more, whether it's denials or claims or whatever it is, they get smaller and smaller value. And traditionally, you've had to make a call as to when does it stop being worth that person's time to chase certain things.
Right.
As you digitize, you get to rethink all of the logic behind the decisions you make, because you can actually go after more. Right? You can
Makes sense.
set
Yep.
people up to. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in sort of process redesign too, to think about, first of all, why do we do the work the way we do it today? A lot of that is just because of the inherent legacy of the systems and the people and the training and everything else that you just have to deal with and act in. You can change a lot of the rules of that game if you use AI. And then you really can free your people up to do the follow-ups, to lean on their relationships with the payers, to close more open items, and let robots, or whatever you want to call this AI these days, let robots do a lot of the transactional sort of legwork that supplements and enables your team to be great.
Right. No, and I think it's interesting too, even before organizations, healthcare or otherwise, are applying AI, before you even get there, even the steps that you take to map your process and really, I mean, intimately become familiar with your own process, you can shave off time and effort and inefficiency just by looking it over again. And then you bring in automation, and then you get even better and better.
So I've referred to that as the lens for a decade, and you're absolutely right. It's an opportunity to, through a new lens, evaluate what you do, how you do it, why, when, who, and without fail, every discussion I've ever had with any enterprise, just that exercise shines light on how they're doing things, and they realize, because let's be honest, people are working really hard to do a good job and keep the ship afloat.
Exactly.
So oftentimes they don't have time to stop and think, why are we doing it this way? And
that's right.
And there were there's some great examples that we had where we used to run vision workshops with enterprises to teach them sort of what is the spectrum of capabilities you can apply. And now let's talk about your processes, and let's talk about why you do what you do. And no joke, there were a number of these that, in the act of evaluating what they do and why they do it, they realized there were certain steps they were still doing that they didn't need to be doing because of some implementation that had happened a year and a half prior.
Yes.
And so some of it's just momentum, right? We're just used to doing things. It's just embedded in how we do it. And so we never challenge because, we've always done it that way, quote unquote.
Right.
And so the act of looking through this new AI colored lens at your operation already creates value. So even if you never implement a single ounce of software, the act of preparing to do so is an invaluable exercise.
Absolutely, it has been in my experience, which is why, like I said, to your point, even if you don't even get there, the act of going through the process to prepare yourself, you learn a lot. And for those of us that used to be the doers of those tasks, when you scale, when you're growing and hiring rapidly, you're distanced from those processes, and so they morph, they change, systems change, client requirements change, regulations change, state policies, payers change. So it is so difficult to stay on top of all of those changes, especially when you are only relying on a manual process to keep you updated.
Right. Now,
So
the other interesting thing there too is it speaks to the importance of ongoing orchestration. So whatever you do, as you said, whether it's just humans, whether you just have people working hard in an enterprise, or if you start to bring in other elements to that work equation, and we're calling them agents these days, but whatever you want to call them, from the robotic process automation to machine learning to AI agents, there is never a scenario in which, to use the advertising spiel of the Ron Popeil device, you never set it and forget it. You always have to be overseeing, orchestrating, managing, and evolving. That's a critical best practice, no matter how digital your operation becomes.
absolutely. So another question, Ian. Many RCM teams are still relying on manual process. What are the risks of failing to adopt some sort of AI-driven automation in today's healthcare landscape?
This sounds hyperbolic, but becomes more and more true as the days go by. But if you don't modernize, you are effectively setting yourself up for irrelevance. You will end because others are modernizing, and you just can't compete. The mechanics with which you compete, as far as your cost to serve or your rates or your margins, you just will not be able to compete. So stay comfortable and do it the way you've always done it at your own peril, and then you get to decide how much longer you want to be in this business. Because if you're not using AI, you're just writing your own epitaph.
Absolutely. And again, to your point, staffing challenges everywhere, not just healthcare, but everywhere. It's nearly impossible for organizations to stay on top of that
Right.
today. And so, applying or at least beginning the process of seeking out some AI driven tool to help with staffing challenges, certainly margin. It really is the way of the future. It
Right.
probably has been for a long time for you, but for a lot of folks, they're really just now beginning to think about it.
Right. And there's two elements there. One, 10 years ago, the concern, the real fear was that this automation was going to come for the jobs and there weren't going to be any more jobs for people. And interestingly, that narrative flipped 180 degrees a few years ago when we realized there just are not enough people for the jobs. And so this isn't a mass unemployment scenario anymore. This is actually, to get work done, you need a hybrid solution. You need the people that you have who are great, people that you can find who you can develop to become great.
Absolutely.
But you do need the tools to supplement them. And frankly, if you want great people, anyone who's coming out of any form of university these days, if you sit them down and start to show them how they manually do stuff, they probably won't stick around for very long.
Right.
So
Also a good point. Yeah.
this is a retention factor. If nothing else, you've got to be more modern because they'll know that you're antiquated the second you begin onboarding. But then the idea that without it you can't evolve your services either. You
Yeah.
just can't offer better experiences to whomever the end customer is to your process, and their expectations continue to grow
Yeah.
as far as what you can provide to them, the speed at which you can do that, the accuracy with which you do that as well.
No, that's a really good point. Staying competitive, not just, in terms of employee retention and recruitment efforts, but also in the specific industries that you're in, staying competitive, because
Yes.
largely the organizations that are moving ahead and rapidly are adopting some form of AI in
Mhm.
their workflows.
Yes. And experimenting as they go, and it doesn't all work, but back to
Yes.
your earlier points, the act of doing that experimentation is in and of itself valuable.
Yes. Yes. And so, for organizations that are hesitant
Mhm.
or unsure, they really just have no idea where to start. What's the best first step in introducing AI into their revenue cycle?
Great question. So, early on, when you start to, again, when you give people that AI lens, they see lots of potential opportunity. The key then is to figure out where you start. And you often want to start both places that are somewhat safe and that are meaningful. And so, uh, there's the concept of sort of the front office versus the back office. The front office, what you do, who you do it for, and how you do it, that will be an area you absolutely get to. But sometimes the back office of just how you onboard your own employees, how you pay your own payroll, how you handle your own just whatever industry you're in, if you happen to be in logistics and supply chain, or if you've got just finance and accounting, those areas, they are costs to operate that are likely inefficient, and so you can start to digitize some of them. Then the other key, and we stumbled on this, so I can't lay claim to, to this being something that we thought about ahead of time, is if you solve problems for stakeholders, if you relieve leaders in an organization of pain that just bothers them daily, you have narratives, you have a story that you can tell that will garner support widely. And so we would see this in massive healthcare organizations, actually, where we would help digitize some of their HR shared service function. And the function itself and the automation was cool, but the end customer was the operational management across this organization that would just inherit so much pain when one of their employees went out on leave and they'd have to sit on phone calls for hours. And there were weird rules, like you could only call the HR shared service function to talk about 3 members of your team. So if 4 members of your team needed to go out on leave, you had to call them back and sit on another 45-minute hold to talk about the 4th person. And that's just pain. And so if you can
Yes.
solve that pain, man, you have got champions throughout the business, and then it's easier to expand your portfolio and look at other opportunities to digitize.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. There are some payers who will remain nameless that have the same policy when trying to call and overturn an appeal or a denial or speak with someone. You
Right.
can only talk about 3 at a time.
Mhm.
Anyway, just
Right. And those
funny.
are those are constraints they put in ultimately to for their own means, for their own reasons. And far be it from us to challenge that. That's They have autonomy and control over their own processes.
Right.
But the pain that's felt as a result of it is all on your side.
That's
And
right.
so if you can digitize, and those great folks who sit there on those phones knowing there's got to be a better way, you develop that better way for them, and then they get to use all of their domain expertise to do so much more valuable things for you and for your end customer. That's really valuable.
That's a huge win. That's a huge win. Um, and this is probably an impossible question, but
Ooh,
how you like
let's
those
do it.
though?
Perfect. Let's see what I
uh,
can make up in response to
Where's
this.
ChatGPT? Um, how do you see AI evolving over the next 5 years, and what do you think leaders need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, AI has stayed alive in our lives because of these fantastic expectations of its capability. And so for the last 70 years, we've had it enter our lives, and then there's sort of ebbs and flows, right? And so I think if there's any forecasting to be done, I think it's safe to say that what we think is all powerful, all creative, all autonomous, that can handle all work, right now, it won't be able to do that. Right. And so we'll retrench a bit from that hyperbole and come back to, okay, well, but what could it do well? And how do we incorporate that into our operation that is still very much a best of both worlds scenario, where we have great talent, really good people, and we have the right reasonable technology coupled to those people to get real valuable work done. And because right now the excitement surround language models and this ability to really absorb information and look for patterns and interpret things, that's people are going to think it can handle all processing, all, like all op note review, all invoice, the sort of atomization, and then we'll realize that it's good at some of it, but it struggled to handle other parts of it. Now, the risk this time around, which I think is bigger than we've ever had before, though, is we need to educate everybody involved in the limitations of these capabilities. Because I can upload a PDF document to ChatGPT, say, and then start to ask questions of that document. Let's say it's a huge claims document, and I ask the questions of it. If I just take as rote whatever ChatGPT gives me back as the answers, then I am making a cardinal sin. I am accepting that AI actually got it right.
Yeah.
And that could end up being very dangerous. So we need to upskill sort of just the general digital quotient of everyone in our team to know what we're working with, its capabilities right now, but also its risks. And, some of it's just kind of the evolution that it's going through, because we can't become so dependent on it and so just acceptant to the fact that it is right. And so that, I think, is where we're going to get better and better at how do you create these hybrids? How do you create sort of a governance layer? How do we create the education that people need to be able to be augmented by these digital twins, where they're responsible and they understand the limitations? And over the next few years, they will get better. They will get faster. You will be able to host language models locally so that HIPAA restraints aren't as much of an issue. We won't be hosting large language models in China that everyone seems to be very excited about right now. Those sorts of issues will be resolved over time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess while we're on that topic, just to, because I'm sure the listeners are going to want to know, what does Ian Barkin think of DeepSeek? Just a 1 minute, what are your thoughts right out of the gate?
And I think anybody who purports to have fully baked thoughts is too confident. Right now, it seems interesting because it's faster, it's cheaper, it's more efficient. But like any miraculous unicorn that shows up, you've got to buyer beware and be cautious. This is back to that digital quotient thing. Like, everyone freaked out for 72 hours that it had literally changed the game. And then you watched it make the same errors that ChatGPT did and realized it's probably because it's predicated on that model. And so, yeah, I could go out and, I can say that I've built a new Tesla in 15 minutes by just cutting out a new badge and taping it on the front of my Tesla. I didn't. I just taped a badge on the front of it. And that's kind of what it feels like this might be at the moment, but who knows? But there's some other efficient things they're doing. It's probably cool. It is interesting that it's rattled this concept that only Silicon Valley has the right to have these mega models that we all depend on. So if that gets democratized, or at least we start to expect that more democratization is coming,
Yeah,
then there's an upside to this news. But it's way too early to know if this is going to be a major part. That said, in my discussions with any of the sort of the companies that I advise or have invested in that use these large language models, it's a boon because it's just yet one more brain they get to tap into.
Yeah.
And they're cross-referencing all of them. They're comparing. there is no sort of one source of truth anymore. Everyone's using Claude and ChatGPT and DeepSeek and
Yes.
and that's only good for us, I guess, as end users of the technology, as long as we're thoughtful and responsible about how we use it.
Yeah, that's a great answer and very fair, very fair. So Ian, thank you so much for
Pleasure.
all of your insights as it relates to AI in general, but also how healthcare leaders managing revenue cycle management can maybe start thinking about it. Those that haven't started thinking about it, how they can start thinking about it. Those that are already using it, I think I think this conversation has been insightful in terms of maybe are they using it in all of the ways that they can and should. And so before we wrap up, thank you for being here. And if anyone out there listening wants to find more information about Ian Barkin or how to contact you or what can we tell them? How can they find you?
Yeah, if they want more of this sort of thing, they, they are welcome to find me on LinkedIn, where I spend way too much time. And I've got my most recent book actually is on. I reference it in LinkedIn, and it's on Amazon. But it's actually an exploration of the democratization of these tool sets. And what I'm really excited about is, as we've long said, that automation is so easy that everyone can use it and even train it. And that has long not actually been the case. That has been a message that's more marketing than actual. But as things get easier and easier, as some of these coding tools allow novices, non-technical people, to turn ideas into actual applications or integrations or data models, I think that's going to really change the game too, because every enterprise has, back to these domain experts, has really capable, smart people who know something can be better, right? They know that they can handle whatever their particular scope of work is. They know there's a better way to do it. Now they can start to explore at least ways to prototype that future state of the better way to do it with
Yes.
these AI tools. So anyway, so I explored that concept and wrote a book called All Hands on Tech. Very recently, it dropped in October of last year. So if you want more of this sort of stuff and you want to explore what I think is going to be one of the key trends going forward, that's a place to go.
And by the way, just for the record, I did download it on Audible, and I'm almost finished with it. And for those that are out there that are interested in reading it, downloading it on Audible, All Hands on Tech, I will tell you that the first portion of the book does talk about healthcare. And specifically AI being used in healthcare, large health organizations.
That's right. We profiled an individual who was at Mass General Brigham at the time. He's at actually a pharmaceutical company now, but he was an early pioneer of automation, intelligent automation, across primarily the finance administration at Mass General. A guy named Ben Berkowitz, who was a really great resource and one of many pioneers we spoke to write the book.
Yeah, I liked it a lot, and I learned a lot. But I think for this audience, I think they'll learn a lot too. So go check it out. All Hands on Tech.
I haven't heard the Audible version yet. They had someone narrate it that I so was it
Yeah,
good?
yeah.
Okay,
He
awesome.
sounds great. He sounds perfect.
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 Authoritative, knowledgeable, easy to.
Yeah, he sounds perfect.
Great. They got the right
Yes, you got
guy.
the right guy.
Yeah, no, but and again, this is the best you can. I mean, the best. One of the things you have to do in whatever role you hold in any enterprise, but specifically in healthcare right now, is inform yourself and understand what the art of the possible is. But back to your point, Lindsay, it's really, really key that you focus on making a difference, focus on understanding your own processes. Don't start with technology. Technology shouldn't be the beginning of your journey.
Absolutely.
The purpose of doing this, the outcomes you can achieve, both from an experience and a financial perspective, that's got to be your guiding light. And then look at how technology helps you to achieve that.
Couldn't agree more. Well said. Thank you. And thanks again, Ian. This is exciting, and thanks for being a part of our first episode in our journey into podcasting. So thank you so much.
I'm thrilled you let me start this journey with you. I'm sure this is going to be a huge resource. Your experience and knowledge in this market is invaluable, and that you're bringing it to people over this medium is incredible. So I look forward to all the awards you get and becoming one of the top podcasts across the nation.
Oh, cheers. Here's to that. Yeah, here we go. Episode 1. Boom, boom, boom. And here comes some more. So thank you, Ian. I appreciate your time. And thanks to everybody for listening and watching, however you choose to digest your podcast. So thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.